it is. I don't know if that's another computer or the same one, but there's this computer.
He's going away a long, long time.
Hey guys, this is Sarah Young, and today we're talking about J.P. Miller, whose house was raided by the FBI on Friday. Most of you probably already know who J.P. Miller is and why this is such a big deal, but if you don't know who he is, go back and watch some of our older videos on J.P. Miller to get caught up. Briefly, Micah Miller was the wife of Pastor J.P. Miller of Solid Rock Market Common, which was a church in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. She was found dead 6 months ago. Her death was ruled a suicide by the police, but her family, friends, and a lot of former members of the church were adamant that it wasn't a suicide and that J.P. Miller may have been responsible either directly or indirectly for her death. JP came out a few months ago with some videos on TikTok acting like he was going to reveal the truth about who was really responsible for Micah's death, acting like it was her family's fault, but it turned out to be a huge nothing burger, and now the FBI has raided his house, and they spent all day there. They carried out a lot of bags, boxes, and multiple computers. As time goes on, I'm sure more information will continue to come out, and I'll do my best to keep everyone updated, but if I'm not able to get a video out, please follow us on social media and subscribe to our blog to stay updated on everything. But so far it sounds like JP was taken into custody temporarily. He wasn't arrested or charged with anything, but like I said, the FBI had a warrant to search his home, and before they went in, they stood outside his house for a while with their guns drawn, so that was pretty intense. The law that's been cited is U.S. Code 2261, and if this is the code violation that they're going to charge J.P. Miller with, he could be in prison for a very long time, because even though her death was ruled a suicide by the police, Code 2261 states that it's a federal felony to cross state lines to stalk, harass, or intentionally cause harm, or to cause someone to cross state lines as a result of stalking, harassment, or the intent to harm. So it sounds like he's being investigated for interstate domestic violence and for financial and even other crimes too. But the specifics on exactly what the FBI has found and what they're looking for hasn't been released to the public or confirmed by anyone yet. Something else that's important to note are the fires that J.P. Miller's neighbors have said he's been having in his backyard over the past several months, including around the time Micah died. So maybe he was destroying evidence, I don't know. If he knew he was in trouble, he could have been roasting some incriminating evidence. And then there's the crime scene that was very close to J.P. Miller's house on Friday. And according to Robbie Harvey, it was on JP's church property. There was actually a body found in a black car just a few hours, if even that, before the FBI raided JP's house. So far, no one knows whose body it is or if it's at all related to the FBI raiding J.P. Miller's house. But I'll tell you what, that is a huge coincidence for a dead body to be found on church property just before the pastor's house is raided by the FBI. But what I want to talk about is something that no one is talking about regarding all this that needs to be addressed. Before I get into that, I think we should all just take a moment and thank God, because this is justice for Micah. It is happening. Even if he isn't being charged for her death and he hasn't been arrested yet, according to Code 2261, he possibly still could be. But even if he isn't, this wolf's time is finally up, I think. And this is a huge victory, not only for Micah and her family and friends and everyone that's been praying for justice for her and investigating this for several months now. It's also a victory for the body of Christ, too. I don't want to speak too soon, but the FBI doesn't usually raid your house unless they already have some pretty solid evidence against you. So unless JP starts a prison ministry, which he might, I think it's safe to say that this wolf is out of commission. He is done. And the body of Christ is a little bit safer now because of it. But what Christians need to talk about now is how we can learn from the J.P. Miller insanity to prevent abuse and corruption in other churches. We know this man is not who he claims to be, so we can safely say that this is the perfect example of a pastor you don't want. He is the exact kind of pastor you should avoid, like your life depends on it, because it might actually depend on it. JP's last sermon, which the church deleted, but we have the full sermon on our channel, it was insane. It had tons of red flags. So check them out if you haven't already. In hindsight, and with what's going on now with the FBI and this mysterious body that's been found on church property, I think we need to talk about what kind of red flags we saw leading up to this. And the most important red flag that we've seen from JP Miller, which is the biggest red flag that your church is abusive or that your pastor is abusive, is the red flag of carnage. This is the biggest and easiest red flag to spot, and it's the biggest indicator, in my opinion, that a church is unsafe, abusive, and corrupt. What is carnage? Well, the dictionary definition is the killing of a large number of people. In the context of the Christian church, I don't necessarily mean the literal killing of a large number of people, but the abuse and mistreatment of a large number of people to the extent that they are leaving the church in large numbers. So in JP Miller's case, there's at least one person who has lost her life, probably as the result of being in a relationship with him. Despite this literal carnage, there are also a lot of members who have come out of that church that are speaking out now and sharing their stories of being abused and mistreated by the church leaders. So there's all sorts of abuses that leave carnage in a church's or pastor's wake. And there's a lot of evidence to suggest that Micah was abused by J.P. Miller in several ways before her death. If a large number of people are coming out of a church who have been battered and bruised by the church leaders, figuratively speaking, or are claiming to have been abused by the church leaders, that is a significant red flag of carnage, and you should take it seriously. Find out who some of the people who have left the church are and talk to them. If your pastor tells you not to talk to them, it's probably because they don't want you to know what happened. If former members are badmouthed and slandered by the pastor and other church leadership, and it seems like anyone who has ever left the church has a terrible reputation and is demonized as an evil, demon-possessed apostate, I am willing to bet that that pastor is guilty of abusing them in some way, and they're just demonizing them to protect themselves. They're poisoning the well, and they're distancing you from their victims to keep you from finding out what really happened. Killers always try to hide the bodies of their victims, and pastors who abuse people are no different. But don't let a church or pastor's demonizing of people stop you from investigating. Dig them up and talk to them yourself, because it's possible they're actually a victim and you don't want to become the next one. So look for carnage. Look for victims who have left the church or who have been excommunicated. And look online too. A lot of people are blowing the whistle on abusive churches now and telling their stories publicly and openly. To be fair, that doesn't necessarily mean they're always telling the truth. Just because someone claims they've been abused, that doesn't mean they were abused. But that's why you need to examine everything. Use discernment and don't feed the wolves. In the meantime, let's celebrate the fact that last week there was justice for Micah.
I want to remind you, like a bunch of people have been reminding me lately, that I'm God's bride first. And even an earthly spouse who's a good spouse, when they know that their bride is being hurt, just imagine what an earthly spouse does. What do you think your heavenly spouse does when you're the bride of Christ and he sees his bride going through abuse and hurt? What do you think he thinks about that? So, encouragement in all this is you are the bride of Christ first before anybody else's. And he's got you. And he sees you. And he loves you.